joining us this afternoon. My name is Titi Park, and I'm the VP for Product Innovation at Afrissance. Thank you for joining us. Before we start the webinar, we're going to take a couple of minutes to tell you about who we are at Afrissance and what we do. So who we are is we are a leadership and organizational development firm born out of a desire to contribute and champion to the emergence of a successful Africa. So basically, putting that in one word, we're committed to igniting a culture of excellence in Africa. Our vision is to see the whole of Africa working and to develop leadership competence in Africa. So there are basically 5 streams of what we do at Afrissance. The first one is around organizational health, which is basically building cohesive organizations that have competitive advantage to function as a business. The second stream is leadership development and coaching, which is basically developing leaders. The third thing that we do is around project execution and leadership. And there we develop project competencies, project management competencies, and leadership competencies in project management. The fourth thing we do is in learning and development. And basically, you're having a taste for that this afternoon on this webinar. And lastly, we're active in digital transformation. So I'm not going to take too much of your time talking about this. If you visit our website, you can get some more information around that. And next, I'm going to introduce to you the speaker for this afternoon, Tim Bosworth. So Tim is a guru, a leadership guru. That's just the one word that sums Tim up. So I hope you can see the slide of Tim as I'm talking to you. You can see all his competencies, all his accreditations, all his certifications. So you guys just relax, knowing that you're in good hands and you're going to be listening to who we call the leader of leaders this afternoon. So thank you very much for taking your time to join us this afternoon. And just to let you know, you can ask questions as we go along, but we'll take the questions at the end of the seminar. So if you look at your screen, you can see where you can actually drop your questions in the chat box. So please drop your questions. Tim will address them at the end of the webinar. So please relax and listen and learn. So over to you now, Tim.
Thank you very much, Titi. That's very kind of you, and it's really nice to be on the call with all of you today. Just a couple of things so that we can just make sure this runs as smoothly as possible. I do like that interaction, and I really understand that those of you that are on the call today, you might have some questions that are coming up. So I just want to reiterate that there is the chat box available to you. You can ask questions. My colleagues will be monitoring that, and we'll use that as a way of being able to continue the conversation through the call and also at the end of the call. I'm extremely pleased to hear any queries or clarifications you might have. I'm going to hand back over to Titi at the end of the call. She's just going to talk to you a little bit more about Afrissance and our company that we're extremely proud of. But what I want to do is I want to sort of get into what we are going to be talking about today. So, well, I was very kindly asked by our managing director, Deji Ismail, to come in and talk to some of our previous clients, some of our possibly prospective clients, the Afrissance team about what it means to be a liberated leader. And we'll get into that a bit later on. But what I want to do is I want to just share with you, I guess it's the first of a few sayings and quotes that I've picked up as I've been working with leaders across the world. And so this is how I'm going to run the session today. I'm going to share with you some of these sayings, and we can talk about them. I'll ask you some rhetorical questions, obviously think about what sort of questions you might have depending on which part we're talking about. And so this one here is from Melissa Poe-Hood, from the one of the alumnus of the what's called the Women of Distinction. She's an honoree. She works very hard with women across the planet. And she basically said everything you need to be a successful leader, you already have. So, you know, think about what that means for you. Your intelligence to see an issue and the way to fix it, and your heart to stay motivated, and your courage not to give up. And in that single sentence, for me, I think there is almost an encapsulation of what leadership means. Leadership is something that we work on so much as people in business, and I'm going to touch on some of the things of what I call the rational parts of leadership. Those are the things that we do, the transactional, the logic, and then also the emotional pieces. And I'm going to share with you in a minute a model that I think, you know, is really useful, and is one of the models that we use when we engage with clients to actually get an idea as to what is it like to be a leader in that company. So this is a really good opening. And what I should say, by the way, is as I'm going through, if you can't understand something, or if I start to drop out, then you know, do put something in the chat box. My colleagues are monitoring. So the objectives today, well, we've got about half an hour, possibly 40 minutes. And in that time, what I want to do is I want to be able to just have a conversation about what the impact of leadership behaviors are in engagement and performance. And we'll talk a little bit about engagement later on. Engagement for me is coming up a lot with my clients. Engagement means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but I want to sort of bring out what I think it means in terms of the leadership space. Then I'm going to start to share with you the model that I mentioned. And this is called the 5 practices of leadership, exemplary leadership. It comes from a couple of almost mentors, heroes of mine, people that have worked in the leadership space for years. And I'll share with you their thoughts. But it's something that I've used quite a lot with clients, and I continue to do so, and will be actually working with some clients in Lagos coming up in the next 2 weeks. And then when we talk about the final thing in terms of what does it mean to define the quality, and what is the foundation of leadership. So I guess this being the style of webinar where you're listening and you get to ask questions later on, just reflect on what these things mean for you. So with that, let me start to talk a little bit about engagement and leadership. And I guess I've put a question here, and again, you know, if you have some things you would like to contribute, then please do put some of your points into the chat box. But, you know, I've asked the question here, what words or phrases come to mind to describe an engaged workforce? What does that mean for you? Now, the other day I was with a client, and someone sat down and they scratched their head and they looked at me and they said, you know what, I think it's just about putting my computer down, putting my phone down, locking them away so I can't get at them, getting up and walking around and talking to and finding out what's going on for my team. You know, what sort of day are they having? How are they in terms of their work at that particular time? What more can I do to support them? And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. But what we have is we've got all sorts of ways of looking at what engagement is specifically. Here's another example from a study that was done quite a few years ago, but I think it's quite relevant for what we talk about today. And it basically says that engagement is almost that emotional connection to your employee. It's something whereby someone will come into work and they will not only do the work that they want to do, but they will do what we call that extra discretionary effort for their work. And that's the key word on that particular saying, discretionary effort. That's what we're looking for. And you know yourselves when you're working with your teams, what that looks like. It could be that someone stays a little bit longer and gets really involved in something. It could be that somebody stretches themselves at a piece of work that they wouldn't ordinarily do. And what you'll find out is that that comes from them really feeling like they are absolutely part of that team and they're engaged in that team. And so, again, if we talk about one of the journals that I often look at, the Academy of Management Journal, Bruce Rich says engagement involves investing in the hands, the head, and the heart. The hands, the head, and the heart. And we're going to look at what that means using the particular model that I'm going to share with you in a minute. But that's, again, talks to the rational. Remember, I used those words, rational, and the emotional. And it's not until we've combined the two that we really are able to be able to get that real engagement going in with our teams. So I talked about, as I say, some mentors, some people I look up to in my particular profession right now, leadership development space. And I'm going to share with you some of their thoughts on what this engagement and what a really liberated leader, as we've called this webinar, looks like. And their names, before I get onto their actual models, are Kouzes and Posner. Now, some of you might have read their book. It's called the Leadership Challenge. I'm seriously not here to sell it, but it does work really well for me. And what they've done is they've actually gone out and spoken to a huge population of leaders across the planet. And remember, this is always really important when you take these studies, what actual population have the study been taken from. And sometimes you'll find it might be from simply a university population between certain ages. Well, these leaders of leaders, shall we call them, have been studying the Leadership Challenge for 30 or 40 years now. And Kouzes and Posner have come up with what they call a workplace attitudes measure. And so talking to what does engagement mean, there are a number of things here that I'm sure will be extremely useful for you. So let me pick out some of them that might work. So, for example, my work group has a strong sense of team spirit. That's something that, do you see that in your day-to-day work? The third one, I'm committed to the organization's success. What does that commitment mean for you? I'd wonder, and that's the sort of thing that I'd want to have a conversation with you if I was working with you and your teams. One of the ones that comes up a lot but is very often missed from leaders, and they find it difficult, is point number 6. I'm clear about what is expected of me in my job. I'm clear about what is expected from me and my job. And so Kouzes and Posner talked about this, and they said, look, if all of these things are in place, and you can see them there, I'm not going to go through all of them today, then what does that mean? And they said, well, let's distill that down. And they came up with 5 what they call leadership behaviors, and they're on your screen now. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one. Each of them has a specific focus. Each of them brings something extra to the leader, and if all of these are in place in some way or another, then there's an absolute certainty that certainly your leadership engagement will improve. And you know, I mean, this slide I think talks to that you know, despite people's differences, their workplace engagement is a result of how their leaders behave. So this is about your behavior. Who are you being? What are you like in your work? And as I've said, you know, the more frequently that leaders demonstrate these 5 practices of leadership, then the more engaged their staff will be. But you might be asking yourself, well, why is this so important? You know, why do we need an engaged workforce? Well, this word engagement is being used across the world of leadership at the moment. I work with many industries across multiple sectors, and you can see here there's some numbers that just talk to the fact that engaged workforces where leaders are strongly practicing ensuring that they get that discretionary effort from their teams will drive revenue, will drive income, will drive profit, and will drive happy shareholders. And you know, I've put a few of these numbers into the presentation today. There is so much out of there. So I think from a lot of leaders that talk to me, they say that's all very well, you know, okay, fine, I've got an engaged team, but what exactly is that going to do for my business? Well, these are some numbers that I hope will start to make you ask those questions. And if I go back to you as a leader and those people on the call, I think really the question is not will I make a difference, is what difference will I make? And I'm constantly going to be coming back to this. And when I talk to leaders, I like to talk about that almost sphere of influence that leaders have, because we have such a cross-functional matrix world that we work in, where we work across teams, both vertically with the organizational hierarchy and horizontally with all of our peers, that it's all about how can I make a difference. And you'll be surprised when you start to look at what you can do in your day-to-day practice. So let's have a look at some of these practices, and I'd like to go through them. Again, if you've got any questions, do please put them in the chat box. My colleagues are going to be opening up the lines in a minute when I've gone through a few of these, and let's have a really rich discussion. So hopefully some of these will come up for you. The 5 practices themselves are split into modeling the way, and we'll talk about that in a second. There's certainly inspiring that shared vision. I hear so much about vision from leaders. What does that vision really mean? Being able to speak your mind, or what they say here is challenge the process. That's another incredibly important thing. And linked to that, in making sure that others feel enabled, or some people like to say empowered to act. And then finally, I remember I talked about the rational and the emotional. We have the final one, which is encourage the heart. So let's dive in and have a look at some of these. So the first one I want to look at is model the way. Now, model the way, as I've said, is one of the first ones that often comes up. And when I talk to leaders, I like to say to them, look, you as a human being at work, visible to your colleagues, your staff, your senior members of your organization, or on the phone, or whatever you're doing, you are always modeling. You are always modeling. So you need to make sure that you understand what drives you. And when we talk about what drives you, we talk about our values. And once we understand our own values, then we're able to set an example for others. And what I will often do with leaders, the first thing I will do is I'll start to get them to think about what motivates them. What are some of the defining moments in their lives? What are the values that if they were to lose out one of the values, would they miss it? Does that affect their decision making? So, you know, I've got a number of the statements that I've been using. This one here: in order to become a leader, it's important that I first define my own values. This comes from colleagues over in the Far East, and you know, so many leaders, you know, often miss out the opportunity because they are so busy to really just identify themselves. So being able to identify what drives you will then help you understand how you interact with others, especially when you're pushed, especially when you end up doing what I call reverting to type. And that can be something that really impacts you as a leader. So if you understand your values in certain situations, you know what it is that you are happy to, shall we say, it's slightly more flexible in terms of value, but there are other values, and it could be one like, I don't know, professionalism or hard work, or, you know, simply having fun at work. That if you lose that, then that really does affect your decision making. And of course, as you go up the leadership hierarchy, that can have a massive effect, not just on a team, but on a business unit and on a whole organization. So that clarity of your values is important, but also the clarity of the organization's values is important. And there's a schematic here that I just want to share with you all, which basically says, if you look at this 4-box model, those employees that really have clear understanding of their own values and their own organizations are more committed, and that's in the top right-hand side of the box. Whereas those employees of an organization where their values are a little bit hazy, they don't quite understand, and certainly they're unclear about the organization's values, their commitment level is lower. And remember, if we go back to that discretionary effort, then that's really, really important. So, you know, it's up to you as a leader to be able to share that message and make sure that your teams really get the direction your company's going. If I just share with you the next statement, it's, you know, I've got credibility written here. Excuse me. Credibility is the foundation of leadership. If you don't believe in the messenger, you won't believe in the message. Where have you been in your day-to-day work life and you've tried to share a message, but you've not been completely bought in yourself? As human beings, it takes a split second to see through people because of the way that we communicate, because of the way that we use our body language. If it's face-to-face, if it's over the phone, we'll listen to the tonality of the messenger. So it's incredibly important that you understand what that means. And you know, I've continued that message here by saying, you know, what is credibility behaviorally? How do you know it when you see it? Well, as I've said, it's all about who you are being as a leader. What are you role modeling? If you want to share your vision, then you better make sure that you really understand it, and that when you deliver it, you really look like you're bought into it. And you know, there's so much talk about this, and this is another saying from a university in the US. Tony Simmons basically looked at this and says, where employees strongly believe their managers followed through on their promises and demonstrated their values, they really were those managers that were able to deliver that message. So, you know, they preach more substantially more profitability than those that managers where they were scoring average or lower on these messages. So it's really, really important that's the case. And of course, when we talk about this, it just simply comes back to who you're being on a day-to-day basis, and that's what this modeling is all about. But of course, you know, you can do that. But if we've talked a lot about the vision, the next one of the leadership behaviors is the inspired vision, and being able to inspire that message. And again, you know, when was the last time you actually looked at your company's direction, or your team's direction, or your business unit's direction, and really understood it and were able to communicate it? And one of the other things I often do is I do inspirational pitches with teams, where I get them actually stand up and we film each other, and they play that film back, and they actually see themselves sharing that pitch. So, you know, sharing an inspired vision is all about the future and imagining the possibilities, but enrolling, or as it says here, enlisting others in the common vision. And you know, it's a bit of fun here, but you know, I actually love this. This came up for me the other day. I was looking to put this pack up together, and you know, so Jim, where do you see yourself in 10 minutes? This encapsulates for me often what I call a tick the box leadership is all about. Yeah, I want to inspire you. I've got my vision. Right, we've done that. Let's move on. And it's not about that. It's about really looking like, as I said, the modeling and the inspired vision. And if you do that, then again, and these are some numbers that come up from companies across the world, that if you are someone that is able to impart this well, then you are basically improving the way that your colleagues and leaders will engage with you. And so if leaders adopt this, then they really can drive a forward-looking vision organization. And again, Michael Hyatt here, the CEO of Thomas Nelson, if you know Thomas Nelson, says leadership is more than just the influencing, and as I've said, the modeling. It's about reminding people of what it is that we are and trying to build, why it matters. It's about painting a picture for a better future. And if any of you have seen and like to watch TED Talks, then I really urge you to go and take a look at some of the stuff that's online, because so many of the leadership gurus at the moment are talking about why it matters. And so what I'd leave you from this particular slide is, why does it matter what you're doing in your company? You know, why is that important for you? And so, you know, I've got something else that adds to that. And you know, Nancy Sullivan here from a conglomerate of companies, Trustmark companies, says, imagine your own career 10 years out and dream of a position that serves you well. Create your own position and create your own future, and then you will be able to create it for others. And if you are going to do that, and again, more numbers come out here, what I've called in this particular case, constituents or employees, you get 25% more engagement. Remember that 25% more a discretionary effort. If you've got 4 of your team, 1 of your team is going to be doing more for you on top of what they've already got. And at the same time, you can be, you know, half as much more effective. So, you know, there's so much that we can do here, and when we put leaders through these leadership challenges, we'll look at this really deeply, and we'll try to understand exactly what it means for you and your business. So that's modeling and getting the vision right. But if that's all well and good, but what do you need to do if you don't work in an organization that can actually challenge and make sure that, you know, the direction we're going in, is it the right direction? And so the third of the leadership practices is challenge the process. And again, this is one of the leadership behaviors that people, in my observations and feedback that I've got from leaders, people like to talk about, but when it comes down to actually doing what I call speaking your mind, is not necessarily something that happens. And you know, there's a few things here that I've put in on this, but let's just talk to what challenge the process means. So whereas we've got role modeling, where you model what you do as a leader and inspiring your team by the vision, here it's all about looking for those opportunities to find something new, find a new way of doing something. How can we improve? A lot of the work I do with leaders is either on innovation, and we do a lot of work on innovative teams, but also continuous improvement. Those are the small steps that we can take on a daily basis. And don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to take small steps to get big wins. And you know, I don't know what it's like in your organization, but if you are in an organization which allows you to take those risks, then, you know, celebrate the fact that, you know, you don't always come up with the right answer. And it is a learning experience. We talk a lot these days about the learning organization. Do you work in an organization which is a learning organization that really challenges the boundaries of what can be done? And as I say, from an Afrissance perspective, this is what we work with in teams. This is what we're very passionate about, certainly across the clients that we're working with. So, you know, this is something that we could work on with you. And, you know, I think that this, you know, is a bit of a funny, there's a guy hanging onto a branch there, but, you know, if you haven't endured the difficult, you cannot become the most successful. It talks to taking a risk and failing. If you read some of the world's most successful leaders in this space, people like Richard Branson, he will continually take risk and to continually fail, and he will fail more to succeed faster. Now, it's not always the best thing, but if you structure it and you deliver it in a way which you learn from each failure, then it can be something that works very well. But you have to be able to challenge the process, and that's what we talk about here. There's a couple of other leaders that have talked about this. There's Catherine Winkle here, who talks about the similarity that most stuck out was how each person had to overcome uncertainty and fear in order to achieve his or her best. And for me, that is someone in a leadership team, someone in a team, an individual who is really able to step out of their comfort zone, to really overcome the fact that, you know, I do want to talk up now. I do want to challenge. I do have a great idea. Is that you? And again, we have Sammy Louis here from Shuttle Trucks in Hong Kong, who talks about everyone can make a difference if she or he dares to step out and seize the opportunity and take the initiative. We hear so much about this these days. But there is so many inspiring acts across business. I mean, I see it every day, and I was working with some leaders the other day, and they were talking to me how they were inspired from some of their team who had taken the opportunity to challenge, you know. And sometimes it is difficult. Sometimes it is absolutely almost impossible. And you know, there's a picture here that just inspired me that I thought I'd put up there. You know, those of us who are lucky enough to have our health, yet there are others that maybe not so much so, and they overcome adversity. I mean, this is maybe some of the most extremes physically, but what are you doing in your team? And if you're able to challenge that, if you're able to really allow your team to speak their mind, then again, here we talk to what the improvement can be in terms of that engagement, that discretionary effort. 25 to 30% more engaged team members, and again, 50% improvement in leaders. And these are numbers, by the way, if those of you are wondering where these numbers come from, they're numbers that come from the latest research from Cousins and Posner across, I think it's about 3 continents and upwards of 25,000 leaders. So they're really seeing how powerful it is. And as I say, when I travel around businesses, I'm hearing so much about the engaged leader and using these styles of leadership, modeling the way, inspiring their teams, and being able to challenge the process. So I hope you can all still hear me. I hope you're not dropping out. Again, do remember to put in your questions. I'd love to hear from you at the end of this call. I want to go through the next couple of leadership behaviors, and then you know, think about some of your stories that you've heard. What could you share with us on the call? What questions do you have about the way that these behaviors exhibit themselves in you know, in a leadership capacity? But I've been talking about challenging the process. That's all very well, unless you're able to make sure that you give what I call accountability to others, and you empower them to actually do their own work. And that's the fourth part of the leadership challenge. That's the enabling others to act, being able to allow them to feel like they can get direction. It was Dan Pink, I think, in Drive, and if you've ever read any of Dan Pink's work, he talks about the surprising truth of motivation, and one of those is autonomy, the ability to be able to direct our own lives and being able to take on challenges often that you'd be surprised people wouldn't necessarily take on if they are given their own direction. So enable others to act talks to that. It talks about collaborating, building trust, having those relationships, and giving your teams the ability to self-determine, develop their own competences, and literally take on what possibly could seem the impossible as well. And you know, that's why you've got the man here trying to pull someone up as they climb this steep mountain, as the analogy for some of the challenges we have in business. So Cora Commodi says it's all about fostering collaboration and building spirited teams, actively involving others, creating an environment of mutual trust and respect. By the way, that trust piece, I hear a lot about trust in businesses. Trust can be so many things, but if you think about trust as being credible, doing what you say you're going to do, being reliable, being able to do it over and over again, and building the business intimacy across your team, and literally just understanding each other, then you've really got an opportunity to deliver some absolutely great enabling for your teams. And again, if I go to the next slide, what we have here is, it just talks to the fact that I mentioned that, you know, we are all human beings earlier on. We're all human, and we need to treat people respectively. So this particular leader, Sinasa from Christie Digital, IT company, says, I listen to what people have to say so that I know what's going on in their hearts and heads. Only then can I work with them to improve. And so this is a leader that talks to the rational and emotional. I was speaking to an employee the other day who simply said to me, look, I just want my leaders to connect to me on my level. Just understand that I've got so much to give. Just allow me to be myself, and then you'll get so much from me. And this really talks to enabling others to act. And this is very much one of the things that will drive that engagement. And you know, I've shared with you some of the data. Again, we have employees and leaders. This actually is something that if leaders exhibit this particular behavior, then it can really drive the effective nature of their leadership and the engagement of their teams. So that's enabling others to act. So we've talked about role modeling. We've talked about inspiring each other. We've talked about being able to challenge the process. We've talked about being able to just enable others to act. The final part, the final piece that I want to share with you is the final piece of the jigsaw. And this is very much the piece that talks to the emotional, and that's what we call encourage the heart. And this is something that when I work with all leadership levels and all teams, is the bit that people often say to me, well, you know, this is the bit that we don't talk about. Let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about, you know, our processes. Let's talk about the manual of authority. Let's talk about our development plan or our performance appraisal. But this is something that is as important as the other four, and this is all about recognition. This is all about being able to speak to what people like to speak about, and that's, why do you or anyone get out of bed and go to work? Why do you do that? And so encourage the heart is very much about recognizing the contributions of your team, recognizing just the small things possibly that they do, and celebrating the success. I do so much work with teams where I talk about feedback. I talk about how to give and receive feedback. So many teams that I work with seem to see feedback as a developmental opportunity or something where you can make an improvement, whereas feedback can just be saying thank you. And that's as much about encouraging the heart as anything. So, you know, I've put a couple of questions in here. Do you need encouragement to perform at your best? Again, another rhetorical question for everybody online. You know, what do you need to be at your best? All of us at some point in time need some sort of encouragement. And when you get that, does it help you to perform at a higher level? Does it help you to perform at a higher level? I would suggest it does. You know, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're working. Just think about when the last time someone's come up to you and just simply said, thanks for that was a great bit of work, or just thanks for working that extra hour, or thanks for putting that extra time in. That's really speaking to the heart and encouraging the heart. You know, I put another saying in here. This is from Jane Binger, who says, they want to know that I value them, that I think they are doing a great job, and that I am not taking their contribution for granted. I often talk about what goes with engagement. I talk also about inclusion. And inclusion basically means Do I feel like I'm part of the team? And what are you doing as a leader to include your team? And I just like to put this statement out to everybody on the call. If you are not including, then you are probably accidentally excluding your team. You are probably accidentally excluding your team. So just think about that. It takes a lot of time to include your team and engage your team, but you need to be visible to do that. And so, yeah, we've got sort of the highest one of the highest performers I see in this space is a lady called a chap called Maurice Chan, who again works over in the Far East, and they said no one would want to come to your cube or my little workspace and talk to you about what you achieved. It didn't make me or anyone else very excited about getting the reward, because when he first started working to where he was, no one would even speak to each other. You know, I work now in open plan offices, and I go into a company and I see that open plan office, and straight away I look and see, are people talking to each other? Are they sharing with each other? Do they even interact with each other? So the highest performing leaders will do a number of things. They are more open and caring. They are very much people that express some sort of affection. I'm not saying that you have to be overly emotional, but there are ways of being able to demonstrate things, and certainly inspirational talking can deliver that passion. Are positive and do encourage everyone, including the low performers. So is that you? And there is a magic ratio. I always talk about it. It's 3 to 1. I always like to say that what we say is that almost 3 bits of positive, or certainly positively put developmental, to 1 piece of say feedback which is developmental or needs to make a point because someone hasn't done something. I'm really passionate about that. And you know, so many companies simply, as I said, rubber stamp this. It's just delivered, and the cartoon here sort of talks to this. This guy saying, Bob, according to our company's management policy, you're just about due for a compliment. That's not where we need to be with this. That's not where we want to be when we talk about leadership behaviors. And enabling the heart is not about that. And if you get to that point, then what you'll see is that celebration can drive, again, more discretionary effort, can drive a more engaged team, can drive so much for yourself as a leader. So, you know, I'm coming to the end of just a taster of these styles of leadership. I'm sure many of you have heard about these styles before in various ways. This was the 5 practices. Let's just recap on that. So I talked about modeling the way. We're all role modeling as leaders. I've talked about being able to share your vision in an inspirational way. But that doesn't work unless you have teams that are able to challenge the process, are able to speak up and speak their mind, and do it in an autonomous way. When do they feel like they're able to act? And then finally, it's all about grabbing the attention of your teams by thinking about, how can I just recognize my team? How can I speak to their heart? So I hope this has been interesting for you. I hope that it's maybe driven some thinking. I've asked a lot of rhetorical questions of the group. I can see we've got about 49 of us on the call at the moment. But I guess my final point I'd like to leave us with before I hand back to Titi Park, just to come back in to run a bit of a Q&A, is you know, are you ready to say yes to this leadership? It's been so great to have you on the call today. Is there something that you can do to change your leadership style, and what is it, and what do you think you need help from? Because that's certainly something that we can come in and do for you. And so what I want to do is I want to hand back to Titi. Are you on the line at the moment? Can I bring you back into the call?
Yes, you can. You can bring me
Great,
back.
great. Okay. So, can I ask you, has there been any questions?
Yes, there is one question I see in the panel from Ola. Ola is asking, what is the best way to challenge the process without killing the vision or getting fired?
Okay, wow. All right. So it depends how seriously you're challenging. The way that that I talk about is good quality advocacy or inquiry. So Ola, what I would do is it's simply being able to good quality advocacy is asking really good questions and saying why you're asking the question. If you're able to do that and you've put the context around it, then it's clear, it's unambiguous, and there's no room for any misunderstanding. If you are wanting to ask a question about a process or something that's going on, then again, it's simply asking your question and saying why you say it. I say so many leaders that don't do that on the end of making a statement, i.e. advocating good quality advocacy or inquiring, making a good, powerful question. And if you do that, then you know, there is no room for any misunderstanding, and it's very much part and parcel of good negotiation, good influencing skills. So that's high quality inquiry and advocacy. So I hope that helps.
Okay, hopefully, Ola, your question has been addressed. There is another question from Femi, and Femi says, the issue of appraisal mechanism is the missing link. Can you please lay more emphasis on this?
Right. So okay, I see. So of course, the appraisal process is being for a leader is the way in which you formally engage your team. What I'm talking about here is how you are able to engage your team to get the best out of them, so that when you get to that appraisal process, then you're able to really have a great discussion with them. They feel like they can open up and talk to you. You are very, very clear about what the vision is of the team. I tell you now, so many leaders that I see that are unable to explain that vision as part of these 5 leadership practices, the inspiring a shared vision, therefore end up with team members that aren't able to make a connection to that, and therefore that appraisal process doesn't go as well. But of course, appraisal processes these days, I would hope, and this is the sort of thing that I would talk in companies, certainly the companies I go into, I'm always asking them, so how often do you engage with your team members? If I hear it's, well, we do an opening year appraisal, then we have a mid-year review, and then we have a closing year. Okay, that's great. I mean, that's the formal way of doing it. But what I would really advocate is regular engagement, regular sit down, so nothing comes as a surprise, that everything is very clear and unambiguous. And if that's the case, then that formal appraisal process can very much link with this way of being. Because as I said, you know, who are you being as a leader? If it's some of these things, then you really drive that engagement.
Okay, thank you, team. There is a question also from Gabriel. Gabriel wants to know if we will be sending the presentation recording after the webinar. Gabriel, we'll have to come back to you on that. I'm going to have to ask Tim, you know, around intellectual property issues. And
so I can answer very clearly. If we're okay from it, I'm absolutely okay with it. No problems.
Oh, great. So, Gabriel, your question is answered. We're going to be sending you the link to the recording of the webinar.
Yeah, and what I'd say, Gabriel, if you're going to share it, obviously there's some context around it. If you want to get in touch with me, I can certainly, you know, share some thoughts, help you be able to do that, or even talk to some of your leaders or your leadership team. Okay.
Great. So I will say this: if you do want to get to contact Tim or Afrissance when we're done, please feel free to drop us a line. That's our email address showing. We would be happy to hear from you. So you can still contact us and ask any more questions after now, and we will respond when we do get your emails. I also want to say, please visit the website. You will get lots more information about Afrissance, what we do, and how we can come and help you. So there's another question just coming in now. It says, how do you deal with employees who are having personal issues which they are not willing to share, as this might affect their performance at work?
Mm-hmm. It's a really great question. Whoever sent that, thank you so much. So, I mean, I talked a bit earlier on about those values, didn't I? About being able to understand yourself. And you know, you really should understand a little bit about your team. You know, what motivates them, what drives them. You know, we're in business, of course. We have to deliver results. If you've got a team member that has got personal issues, there is nothing wrong with asking them what's going on. If they don't want to share that, then I'm sure in many of the companies that you work in, there is an ability to be able to share with others, whether it's from you know, a program, whether they're able to go and talk to someone from HR or whatever. But I think really it's all about caring. It's just acknowledging that you understand. Of course, it's being very clear that, you know, we want to help you, we want to support you. At the same time, you know, if you won't share with myself as a leader talking to you, then who can you share with? Because I want to make sure that we support you to get back on track. So I think really I would hope you wouldn't get to that point, because I would hope you'd pretty much understand what's going on for your team. I'm not saying that you intimately know them, but there is always ways of being able to almost direct them to someone that they can talk to be able to support them. Of course, we're all in situations where things get very, very difficult. And if that's the case, that's quite, you know, it's something that you have to obviously pass on to other professionals. But as leaders, if you do that, you're doing one of the practices, which is encouraging the heart. And you'll be surprised. Often people will open up if they don't feel like they are pushed. So it's something that, you know, again, coming back to not being surprised, understanding your team, hopefully will avoid that situation.
And I think this also ties into the next question here. It's talking about trust. It's saying, can you please expand more on the issue of trust?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned it briefly. I mean, I do a lot of work on trust. I just moved the slide. So I subscribe to it. I mean, it's something that it's a big question that whoever's answered the question, if you want to get in contact with me, I'd be happy to talk to your team, yourself. I subscribe to it. There's a guy called David Maister who wrote an amazing book called The Trusted Advisor, and he talks about trust. And one of the ways he breaks it down is what I mentioned about being credible, being reliable, building that rapport or business intimacy with your team, but then at the same time keeping your ego low. And if you're interested, you want to hear more about that, then I can certainly share that.
Yes. And we have a question here from Deji. Deji wants to know, of the 5-step process, which do leaders find more difficult or find most difficult? So
I would actually say, from the point of view of finding it most difficult, no one of them is the most difficult for anyone, because they all do them to a certain, a greater or lesser extent. It depends on the leader. We are all better or worse than at some of these. What I would say is that often, and what I've observed with leaders over the last year or year and a half, in many different sectors, many different industries, is that a piece about being enable others to act and being able to allow them to speak their mind is one of the most difficult, because the company culture often gets in the way. And I'm not going to go into a big discussion about company culture now, but it's really being able to think, well, in your own team, do you allow the team to speak up, and therefore are you enabling them to act? So if there was one of them that would jump out for me, I guess at the moment that's coming up the most, then it would certainly be enable others to act. So great question, Deji, thanks.
Yeah. And one more from Olatokumbo. Tokumbo wants to know, in infusing collaboration and inclusion and encouraging others to act and show empathy, how do you maintain balance and not be taken for granted?
Right, so I'm trying to understand that, and let me see if I can decode that. So not be taken for granted. Well, okay, so great question. There's a couple of things here. So there's what we call situational leadership and authentic leadership. What I mean by that is that all of us on a day-to-day basis flip between the two. We switch. Sometimes we're ourselves, sometimes we play a role. We all play roles every day. We're a husband, wife, we're a friend, a colleague, a family member. You know, you need to decide who you need to be in front of your team. If you are having those conversations where they really believe that you are being yourself and you are not being contrived in any way, then often they won't take you for granted. There is a balance here, and that's that balance between the authentic and situational leadership. It's the same with any profession, any process, any group of people that are working together. Finding that balance so people don't just take advantage of you is absolutely key, and you'll see that coming up. And again, you know, if you want to talk about that, that's the sort of thing that we'll do with your team. We'll look at where those types of leadership come in. And it's not simply playing a role all the time. It's also being as authentic as you can be. Okay?
Yes, and I'm conscious of the time. We have 2 more questions, and I'm going to tell you the 2 right away, and that may be all we have time for today.
Great.
So the first one says, how do you manage team members who are not recruited by you as the leader of the team?
Great
and
question.
Have different values from yourself?
Yeah.
That's one. The next one is, how much time one-on-one would you spend with each direct report on a weekly basis? And we have 2 more after that.
Okay, so let me take these, and what I'll say, if there are any other questions that are coming in, then we'll try to get to those. I'll get an answer, and I'll get that back to you through Titi. So how do you manage others as a team? Simply, someone said to me once that, you know, as long as I help my team shine and I've done my job as a leader, I think it's incumbent for all to take on a team and help them be the best they can be. So it doesn't matter whether you haven't recruited them or not, you've got them. They're part of your team. So I'll just make that very quick statement. I think that's really important as a leader. In terms of the time perspective, you know, you'll know your team. What I would say is, if you're going to spend 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and 5 minutes 3 times a year, you get what you put into your team. It's as simple as that. You know, sometimes some of your team need more, need less. There are many ways of looking at this. We have what's called the skill will matrix that I work with teams a lot, and you can determine whether your team members need more or less time. So you decide, but I would certainly say that you know, the more effort you put into your team member, again, the more discretionary time you'll get back from them. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. I'm conscious that it's 3 o'clock now, but for those who can still stay, we do have a few more minutes to address a couple more questions.
So I've got another call I've got to go on with one of our clients. So what I'll do is, as I said, if there's any other questions that are coming in, please put them in. Titi will take them down, and we'll get them back to you somehow. I'll just reply, or I'll get a Skype call with you. Okay.
Okay. So on that note, we do have 2 more. Well, one's a comment and one's a question. So thank you so much, team, for your time, and thank you everyone who has joined us here today. We do look forward to speaking with you still and engaging with you to help you develop and partner with you. So please send us an email. If we didn't have time to take your question, we do apologize for that, but send us a mail and we'll get back to you. So thank you everyone for your time. I trust that you found this engaging and useful, and it's goodbye for now until the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.